Welcome,
Uh,
welcome everybody to this edition of the Explorers. My name is Jimena Perry. You know me already. I'm the project manager of this project of the International Federation for Public History. And today we're going to be talking about digital technologies and humanities, which is great because we haven't done that so much in the Explorer. So this is actually a very interesting event. Today's session is called Using Digital Technologies to Explore and Reconstruct African Histories and Identities. And we have with us Mutanu Kyany'a, who has very kindly accepted our invitation. Mutanu is a digital society expert and the head of programs at African Digital Heritage, where she provides leadership in the execution of a holistic digital practice within African cultural heritage. Informed by her background in community development and computer science, Mutano works with African communities to actively reimagine and redocument their histories and cultures through the adoption of digital interventions that center their needs and realities. Mutano, thank you very much for accepting the Explorers invitation, and we are very eager to hear you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jibena. It is an honor to be here. Good morning, good evening, my fellow explorers. My name is Mutanu Kyany'a, and it is an honor to be joining you on this version of the Explorers Talk. Today, I'm joining you in the capacity of the head of programs on outreach at African Digital Heritage, a nonprofit organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. We seek to promote a comprehensive, critical, and informed approach to digital solutions within African heritage. Our goal is to create a digital ecosystem where African cultural heritage is not only accessible, but is authentic, usable, and considerate of the wishes of source communities and institutions. We are gathered here today to talk about how we leverage technology in the exploration and reclamation of African histories and identities. But before we get into the nitty-gritties of how we do this, let me start by giving you what I think exploration is. And for me, exploration is a setting on a trip in search of something. Sometimes the trip can be well thought out, but most times it turns out to be really adventurous. For the explorers who explored Africa in the 18th century, though, the likes of John Speke and David Livingstone, exploring meant sailing on dhows across oceans and seas to foreign lands, where they will then explore the African continent, at times following rivers and streams, looking for their sources. It is in these explorations where they went officially naming stuff, claiming to discover natural bodies like Lake Victoria, as we know, and heavily documented their versions of the expeditions. It will be impossible to not connect the dots of how these explorers helped pave the way for African colonization by Europe later in the 19th century. Centuries later, African digital heritage plus numerous other explorers on the continent and in the global south are using technologies to redocument African histories and reclaim African identities. The universe really has a sense of humor because the same seas and ocean routes that the explorers in the 18th century journeyed on to get to Africa are the same pathways our internet cables are using to allow us to digitally explore. But this time, these pathways are helping us explore our histories and reclaim our identities. Our good friend, Mr. Patrick Gadara, observed that true decolonization requires more than just the physical absence of the colonizer. It requires deconstructing the frameworks that have been used to define African history and the place for the colonizer. We at African Digital Heritage are in turn using technology to deconstruct these very frameworks, and in a quest to decolonize the continent and help document African histories, reclaim and reconstruct African identities. Just as the explorers of the 18th century, our expeditions have been full of adventure and discovery. Allow me to invite you into some of them. So for the first exploration that you're going to go on today, I'm going to talk about a project where we're digitizing the Gede ruins. So in 2022, we were contacted by the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO to help them undertake a digital documentation of the Gede ruins. Sorry. Gede is located between Malindi and Kilifi in the coastal region of Kenya, 94 kilometers north of the city of Mombasa. The earliest settlement of the town dates back to 1041 to 1278, as you can see on the slide. The town was a significant trade center along the East African coast, with finds such as Ming China vase and the Venetian glass being excavated from the site. Gede's prosperity peaked in the 15th century, but by the 17th century, the town had been abandoned. The town's abandonment is attributed to several factors, including raids from neighboring communities, arrival of the Portuguese, conflict in neighboring city-states of Mombasa and Malindi, and a drop in the water bottle. Unfortunately, historical writings about Gede only offer insight from foreign influence and archaeological excavations done by the British in the 1880s. I remember as a kid growing up when we'd visit the site because it's a popular tourist site. I used to think this town wasn't inhabited by any Kenyans, yet it was in Kenya. But it wasn't my fault. I don't know if you are keen on the official expert I just read to you about Gede, the one on the screen right now. You realize that they found things like Chinese glass, they found Vietnamese glass, but we do not have mentions and names of the inhabitants of the towns, neither of the neighboring communities. One of the questions that guides our practice at African Digital Heritage is, for whom are we digitizing for? For whom is the archive meant to serve? So, in as much as NATCOM commissioned us to help preserve the tangible history, it was only right to include the intangible aspect too. If the digitization was going to inform young girls like I was, who in the future want to learn about Gede, here our contribution was to counter the narrative of Western domination of this heritage site by documenting a more inclusive and accurate history. We did this by capturing interviews of local community members in their respective original language. I will try and play this video.
Mkazi wa hapa Gede, na tena mimi ni mzee wa kijiji katika area hii ya hapa Gede. Msitu huu unatufaidisha kwa wageni wakija wanatembea katika msitu huu, watu wetu wanapata siku za kutumia sisi wazee. Na tena kuna miti iliyo ni ya matunda. Wale wanyama wetu wa porini wanakuta hapo, hata binadamu pia wanachukua na kufanya juisi. Pia kuna hii miti tunaweka mizinga ya nyuki, ndiyo asali ni dawa ya kusaidia sisi hii zote. Na pia kuna haya yanazaliwa mengine kutoka na miti hii hapa. Kwa hivyo huu msitu unatuletea mambo mengi yaliyo yananufaa katika maisha ya hapa Gede. Pia kuna watu wengine wale waasili walio hawana madini wanatumia hii miti kutoka hapa kufanya dawa ndio inaweza kutibu. Na tena kuna miti mingine huwa ina mambo yaliyo, sisi watu wa zamani walikuwa wakija hapa Gede na kuitumia hiyo kama mungu yao, na wanaomba kama ni mvua kama hivi hainyeshi kwa muda mrefu, wanaenda hapo wanatengeneza mambo yao kwenye shina hilo la mti huo wanaosema kuwa huu ndio wao, halafu na wanaomba na mvua inanyesha. Hata magonjwa mengine yaliyo hapo zamani walikuwa wakifanya, wanafanya hiyo mambo yao kitenda chao au tamaduni. Kama kuna magonjwa yanakuja huwa yanaisha. Kwa hivyo msitu huu unatusaidia kwa mambo mengi. Ikiwa mimi niko na miaka 81 na miezi hiyo, na hii miti nayo sili kwa kidogo tu sasa. Kwa hivyo watu wanaweza kutumia mabuni kutengeneza juisi na mtu mwingine ambao huzaa matunda yale ya kitundwa nayo yanauzwa, yanaleta pesa. Na nyuki nao inategwa wakipatikana manyoka, ile ndio ambayo inauzwa, ingine inapelekwa Amerika kuuzwa, ingine inatumika madawa. Kama hiyo sauti yangu nasikia sasa ina chini. Ukipata hiyo nikichanganya na mayai mabichi, hiyo itaondoka. Lakini sasa natumia dawa za kizungu. Lakini zile dawa za kienyeji ziko hapa. Kwa hivyo mimi hayo ni mambo ambayo nimeona sasa bado na actually excavation is
sorry for that. So in the process, as you had in the video, we learned that the town holds a strong presence in the oral history of the Mijikenda community, who attributed sacred and spiritual meaning to it, a fact we couldn't find in the historic documentation about Gede. According to oral tradition, the site is protected by spirits, as you had, and ancestors who are said to harm anyone who endangers the site, something we wouldn't also find in historical books. But above all, for me, this was a really act of reclaiming our identities, because we got a chance to document this history in a local language in a way that the people can understand it. So for my next exploration, I will take you through a project that we did in 2022, and this was a virtual reconstruction of Kamirisu Theatre. This project, before I even start talking about it, serves as a demonstration of our way of caring for histories outside the traditional museum framework, which in Kenya's case is very much colonial. It also allows us to question the dichotomy between making and thinking. It also shows the power of designing a collective process that shows memory workers to think and learn together with communities. So, for context, Kamirisu is a town near Limuru, Kenya, that was established as an emergency concentration village during the state of emergency. Such villages were set up under villagization policy in 1953 in order to cut off communication and support between the Mau Mau. Mau Mau were Kenyans who are fighting for their land back and fair pay during colonization. So this is where the village, this is a video, this is a screenshot from Google Maps of current Kamirisu. The villages established were basically internment camps surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, intended to interrupt the flow of support between people in the camp and the villages. Because of the villagization, most of the occupants of the post-colonial Kamirisu consisted of peasant workers, those who worked for surrounding multinationals like Bata. On this map, you can see. I'm trying to look at that. So Bata is a multinational shoe company, and it's located in Kamirisu. So in the when you follow the blue line, that is how far Bata was from the Kamirisu theater that I'm going to talk about. So Kamirisu, as I'm saying, it consisted of peasant workers who worked for surrounding multinationals like Bata, commercial and domestic workers, and the agricultural wage earners who provided a source of cheap labor to the tea and coffee plantations in Limuru. Now, present day, again, this digitization is not about the whole of Kamirisu, but a social project termed the Kamirisu Theatre. So enter the Kamirithu Community Education and Cultural Center, popularly known as KCECC. The Kamirithu Community Education and Cultural Center arose from a call from the community. It was informed when the villagers sought Ngugi wa Thiong'o to teach them. Ngugi says he recalls a woman, Mrs. Armon, incessantly coming to his house and saying to him, "We hear that you have a lot of education and write books. Why don't you and others of your kind give some of that education to that village? We don't want the whole amount, just a little of it and a little of your time." For context, Kamirithu is Ngugi wa Thiong'o's home, is Ngugi wa Thiong'o's rural home, but he used to work in Nairobi, which is Kenya's capital, as a lecturer. And so they heard that he was writing plays and he was teaching people there. And so this woman kept going to his house to tell him, "Please, can you just give us a little bit of this education?" Because most of the peasants in Kamirithu weren't educated. Fast forward, Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Ngugi wa Miri, two literature professors from the University of Nairobi, as I mentioned, together with the executive committee and the village at large, worked together in writing and editing their seminal play, Ngahi Kandenda, which translates in English to "I Will Marry When I Want." In the process, we see two revered professors who teach adult literacy programs, learning from the community aspects of their history they themselves did not even know about. Thereafter, there arose a need to build an open-air theater in order to preserve the space for social gatherings. The people of Kamirithu designed a prototype using matchsticks and fundraised for the materials to build the theater. This was their Harambee of sweat. Harambee is Swahili meaning pulling together. They refused to have a regular Harambee to seek funds from the elite members of the society and instead pull their resources together to build a theater for themselves, a product of their own sweat. This is what marked Kamirithu as a single theater model, as it was built by the people for the people. I wish I had enough time to paint the full picture and lay down the full story of the Kamirithu theater as we know it. But to summarize it, the people of Kamirithu, together with the two Ngugis, curated two powerful plays that spotlighted the evils of colonization and the ways in which colonization persisted through neocolonial domination, that we see the government retaliating by criminalizing the play, disbanding the KCEC, now the theater, and sacking its executive committee. As if to ensure complete erasure of the cultural center, the open-air theater was razed to the ground and an adult education center was built on the land. And as if to ensure that KNECC did not resurrect, they built a police post on the land too. And so on this map, as you can see on these two dots here, on your left, you get to see the present, it's not on the Kamirithu Youth Polytechnic, but just next to it a few meters is the Kamirithu police station, as I'm telling you. So in 2022, we were approached by two professors, Makau Kitata and Ken Ukupas, to help think how we could use digital tools to reimagine the history of Kamirithu. And we decided to do a 3D construction of the theater. Together, we approached the reconstruction as an opportunity for community archiving, as members of the original cast are still alive. To supplement the scant documentation of Kamirithu we found during the desktop research, we consulted the original set members in order to tap into their collective memory and get the most accurate representation of the theater. This was an exercise in collective rememory. We ended up coming up with 4 drafts, and in the process, just like the two Ngugis, learned about a history we were not privy to. And so I will show you the drafts. So this was the first draft. This is what we got from the secondary sources, which were a book that Ngugi wa Thiong'o has written and a few newspaper articles. And then our project partners took this to the original cast, and they gave us a few revisions to make. So I remember the first revision that they said was the seats are supposed to be in semicircular, like a theater, following the stage of the theater. And so in this, And then they also said like it's supposed to be wide. And so in the second draft, we built this because they asked us to increase the space between the stage and the place where the first people are sitting, because they termed this space as an opera, where they will sometimes demonstrate how the Mau Mau and the colonial askaris used to fight. And so we did that, and then it was taken back to the original cast members, but then they said, okay, it looks nice. We still need other adjustments. We still need to make other adjustments. And so here, as you can see, we kind of carved the theater, as I was trying to say in the morning, but then they also said that, and then this was taken to them, but then they said, okay, it kind of looks nice, but it doesn't really reflect the chain of Kamirithu, because Kamirithu is located in a valley. And so it kind of goes downhill. And so the sitting spaces, the sitting planks should be equal in terms of height. And so this was the final thing that we came up with. But one other thing that they also told us to do for the final simulation was to add tea leaves in the background, because Kamirithu was a tea growing area, still is, but in a few places, because again, urbanization. And then we took this, this was the final draft. And I'll try and show you a video of what the virtual reconstruction looks like. So as you can see, this was the gate. It was built of bamboo. And then you enter here, and you can see that these places are carved. There's vegetation in the background because Kamirithu is very green, as you saw in the map that I tried to show you earlier. They also wanted to see themselves in the simulation. That's why it was important to have people reenacting a play and give simulation of people reenacting a play. They also asked us to, as I said, add trees and include people in, because one of the things that they said was this play used to attract so many people such that at times children would watch the play from up the trees. Yeah, so they also made us do like simulations of their audience, which I think is really nice. So I remember when we first went to Kamirithu to show the cast members the final simulation. Suddenly we had these women and men in their 80s breaking in song and dance. It was such an affirming reaction to the work that we had done. I remember one of them saying that he felt like he was 18 again, and he was waiting for 2 p.m. to go and rehearse. The decision to virtually reconstruct the Kamirithu Theatre was a strategic one, especially given that the land on which the theatre was built is currently occupied by a polytechnic, as I mentioned before. Additionally, the story of the Kamirithu Theatre is mostly found in academic archives, out of the reach of the public and the individuals who took part in this freedom project. Kamirithu, both the physical theatre and the virtual simulation, in my opinion, is a significant actualization of the colonial resistance. This exploration shows us that collaboration and artistic expression are necessary in the reclamation of African identities and histories. They remind us of the importance of making work for us, that we are our own primary audience. They assert to us that our histories are living and necessary for our collective liberation. And so the final project that I'd like to talk about, or rather the final exploration that I'd like to go on with you guys, is our most recent project. It's termed the Talking Objects Archive, and it's a partnership in collaboration with members of the Talking Objects Lab. So Talking Objects is but before I start talking about Talking Objects, sorry for that. Before I start talking about Talking Objects, let me back up a little. A few years ago, when we started African Digital Heritage, we conducted research on the state of skills in the Kenyan cultural heritage industry. The findings pointed to the fact that most cultural workers were doing this as a hobby. Most did not, and still do not, have training in culture and heritage issues. They practice largely by self-initiative, observation, reading, trial and error, and continuous improvement. While this speaks to the state of cultural heritage work in Kenya, for me, it was also a confirmation that, one, memory work is important. We had numerous enthusiasts working independently to explore who they were and reclaim their identities. I say working independently because according to the Kenyan Constitution, it is the museums and the archives who have the mandate to protect, preserve, and promote Kenyan culture and heritage. And then for me, the second confirmation for this was that colonial frameworks were simply not working for indigenous people, and they had to innovate ways to preserve, protect, and promote their own cultures and identities, innovations that were reflective of their realities. So now, Talking Objects. Talking Objects is a digital archive that seeks to break down and counter Eurocentric perspectives with new narratives, epistemologies, and schools of thought. I firmly believe that in order to counter these narratives that explorers in the 19th century documented and the colonizers in the 19th century heavily documented to center themselves in foreign lands, we must first we must first have access to these problematic narratives and collections. The archive is centered around objects located in Africa and in Europe, which thankfully have been digitized, again, the power of digitization, thus eliminating the physical access barrier issue that people on the continent have had for years when they want to actually interact and get to use some of these collections. I think it is also important to state that at this point, that the innovation and intention behind Talking Objects does not negate the need for immediate repatriation of stolen objects, but instead it works to create digital worlds in which these objects can live until their return. We, as African Digital Heritage, together with our partners, hold steadfast that the conversations around immediate reparation should not be dulled by the creation of digital cultural heritage archives. One is not a replacement of the other, nor a permanent acceptance of alternative placeholders. So, Talking Objects, in order to counter the relatability issues, the archive invites communities into the space and gives them some sort of agency to change the way cultural artifacts have previously been described due to outdated colonial, patriarchal, and hegemonic structures, by serving as a door opener to new epistemologies and a different view of what knowledge can be today. Hopefully, this exploration builds a living archive, an archive for the now and the future. An archive that improves the representation and participation of people who feel that museums and archives was and are not for them. For me, this exploration is an act of breathing life into collections that have been carrying withered souls for eons, an archive that gives birth to new life propagations, and allows these collections to do whatever in conversation and symbiosis with fellow humans and fellow archives and collections. And when the time comes, they will die. But before that, they will have given birth to new narratives and new stories. Because this exploration is still in the works, I can only give you a sneak peek of how it looks like. So as I was saying, we are trying to make sure that fill these gaps that we usually have around our collections. So, and then it can be through conversations, it can be through articles, it can be through artistic expressions, and then we try and show how they relate to each other in order to give life to these new collections. However, please, this exploration is still in the works, as I have been saying. Together with our partners, the Talking Objects, we hope to launch it by the end of the year. So be on its lookout. I can't wait to hear what your adventures with it will look like. But before I sign off, and I want to sign off on a hopeful note before I invite questions. I sign off saying that hopefully what comes out of these explorative works that I have just shown is the retelling of stories and reclamation of identities that match who we are. What comes out should also be the redocumenting of histories, places, and artifacts in languages and forms that situate us and are centered around us. Thank you for joining me for this journey. Feel free to follow the QR codes on your screen, but I've also left my email in case you'd like to reach out. Thank you very much. I'm open to any questions.
Mutanu, thank you very much. This was really amazing. I mean, it's really very inspiring work. I have like two comments and some questions. First, I of course I like very much the use of the word exploration, because obviously it identifies with like the project that we do in the International Federation for Public History, like just looking and exploring and finding out. And I also find it
Yes.
very, very, I mean, it resonated with me a lot, being also from the Global South and from Latin America, as I told you. The way you are using and contesting and discussing and analyzing all the narratives around the colonization. I think it's very important for the Global North to understand that we from the Global South have been thinking about these issues for a very, very long time. And that
Yes.
perhaps with other names, perhaps with other, I don't know, um, frames, but that it's nothing new. It's nothing new for us, and that we have a long history, many things to say. So they don't have to tell us how to think about it. And when you mentioned a very powerful sentence like our primary audience is us, I think that sums up everything. I think that's very, very powerful. We do this, and in this case, you and your organization do this work for you, not to prove anybody any different, but just to recover your history. I think that's very, 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 very powerful. And I think it's a work that needs to be uh, well known. Hopefully this video will make it known, but I think that was really, really powerful. So thank you, and really inspiring. Thank you. I want to ask you something about I want to ask you something about the organization itself. African Digital Heritage, when did it started and why? How did you get together? Who are you? Because I guess you have a team with you. Like, why did you realize that this was the way to work on what you were talking about?
So there can be two stories of how we started, but officially we started 5 years ago, according to the government. But we we realized that we had been doing this work and have been doing this work for years. So our founder Chao started a project called Save the Railway, which was basically to situate the stories of Kenyans around the railway as you know it, because the story again of the railway that had been told was just about who built it, why it was built, and why it was going, but it never included the stories of the people it served, or the employees, or the people whose land the railway literally lies on. And so ADH was built as, again, an alternative for what we know as museum frameworks right now. Just as I said, when we started, I was part of this team that was doing research on the state of skills skills in Kenya's cultural heritage space. But looking back, what I learned was that these frameworks that have existed in the GLAM space just do not work for some people. And so in some kind of alternative way, because for them it is important to document stories that situate themselves, stories that are reflective of who they are, stories that they believe in, stories that when they read, they can see themselves in. we started African Digital Heritage because of the power that digitization is giving historians and memory workers across the world. One of our very beliefs, as I was trying to tell you, is even as we start digitization projects, we don't just start them out of because things have to be digitized, but we love working with communities first to see what their needs are and to see if whatever it is that you want to digitize resonates with them. And then secondly, so that kind of answers who are we digitizing for and where are we digitizing? Because I strongly believe that there's no point of setting on a digitization project if it will just leave and not be accessible to people. And so one of the many reasons as to why we also push for digitization projects to be able to live outside of whatever platform that they're in and go and interact with online audiences, and at some point take back this digitization project to the communities, as I showed in the Kamirisu Theatre virtual reconstruction, is that these conversations kind of influence not only our place in the virtual world, but also our place in the physical world.
Mutanu, that leads me to my second question. When you talked about the Kamirisu, is that how you pronounce it? Kamirisu project.
Yes.
You talked that you used you and your team used sources that from academia. So I would like to ask you precisely that. How is your relationship with academia? But how's also your relationship with the communities themselves? How has the impact of your work being received? I mean, what's the impact of your work in the communities? Have you received like support all the time? Has it been difficult? How has that process been? Because you are officially a young organization.
Yes. Let me start with the community. I think the thing about the communities that we've worked with are very receptive. And I want to believe that they're very receptive because finally they are seeing people doing research and building things, people who look like them, people who want to write their stories, because unfortunately, most of this space was done by explorers from the global north and academicians from the global north. So for us, because we are relatable and it's our people, and for me, especially look at it as just me acquiring my own curiosities, it has been very easy to navigate communities. Just as I mentioned, for example, in the Kamiritu project, I remember very well when we took to them the final simulation and showed them the video. One of these old men stood up and they started singing, and so it's old men and women who can't even walk and they're singing like they're 18 again. And one of them said, I feel like I'm waiting for 2 p.m. and we're going for rehearsal, and you could see the light in his eyes. And I think that for me was a stamp of approval for the work that we do. In terms of academia, the space that we occupy is we kind of straddle between the academic space and the community, but also the technological space and like the programmatic and practical space. So at times, of course, the way academia writes their articles can be different with ours, but we try and make sure that we do not just lean on the academic side, even if the project is an academic one, that we actually get to tell the story because our audiences are not only in academia. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we have done the balance. But it has been pretty interesting to just see even guys from like the academic side reach out to us and say, we love what you're doing. We think that you have programmatic knowledge and practice. So if you could please come and talk to us about that. So yeah, it's been like a really nice journey trying to balance and form relationships with people in the academic side.
Mutanu, and also you mentioned that you were officially functioning by the government, but then what's your relationship with the government? Has that been also supportive? Is there any kind of discussion there?
Yes, yes. So in this, some of this researches that we are doing, actually, we have spoken to government officials and even have government officials come for trainings, because I truly believe that a sector can only be improved if you involve people from the government. In as much as you're trying to do a lot of the work, the laws need to work in your favor. And so we have been trying to involve government bodies and people who are working in the government. We have trained people from government working at county level on how to digitize. And so, yeah, we are working in tandem with communities and governments too. And I can't wait to see how some of this research that we have done gets to influence some of the laws and gets to influence the cultural heritage space, not only in Kenya, but in the rest of Africa.
Mutanu, and where does your funding come from?
Oh, so we usually apply for grants. If anyone knows a grant that they'd like to, that they think would fit us, please send it my way. My email is on your screen. But yes, we do apply for grants, and we are open to working with partners in projects if they have money, but if they have budgets, or if they're working on a project that they think we can be good partners in, as long as our goals and our ways of work kind of align. Because sometimes the thing about partnerships is that you might not be in alignment. So we'd rather work with people who we are in alignment with. But yeah, if we are open to partnerships, actually most of the projects that I highlighted today were partnerships. And yeah, so feel free to reach out.
Okay, Mutano, and how do you see the African digital heritage in the future? I mean, what's in stake for the next years? How do you see yourself in the organization, but also
Yeah. Yeah.
what's
I
up?
get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Jimena, for that really important question. I think, as I was saying, the space is new. The organization is also relatively young, as you were saying. But in the 5 years that we have been in operation, we have been able to carry out and execute projects in ways that were not only life-changing to the community members who are involved in them, but they also shifted the space. So I think for me in the future is to see the impact of the projects that we are doing, as I'm saying, and I can't wait to see how they get to influence conversations about how we remember our histories, how they get to influence policies and laws around cultural heritage in Kenya and in Africa. But above all, I hope that the work that we do serves as is informative to the people who will come after us, for the future generation, that they will be able to see that these people actually redocumented these histories for us, and they are able to do it in their storytelling, in their artistic expressions, in whatever way that they like to do it. So that's for me and how I hope that the future looks like for us.
Mutano, and I saw on your website that there's a relatively big team. Um, can you tell us about the team a little bit? About the team that works with you?
Yeah, so I will start with Chao Maina, who's our founder. She's a Dan David Prize winner from last year, actually. And then there's me, who's the head of programs and outreach. And then we have a resident researcher who kind of guides the research process. She's called Mudhoni Mwangi. And then we have Wairimu Nduba, who is a community expert. So she helps us build community. We are trying to run a project called the Culture Catch-Up, where we sit together with practitioners working in Africa and in the Afro-diasporic space, just talk about innovations and issues surrounding the cultural heritage space in Africa and Afro-diasporic space, as I was saying. And And then we have the head of communications, who's Kylie, who helps with communications. And then we have an operations person who helps with who helps with logistics, and that's Cheryl Ogad.
Most of you are women?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Forgot to mention, we are a women-led and women-run organization.
Yes, that's what I didn't want to assume, but I that's what I saw on the website, and I also wanted to highlight that it was by women. So I mean, I think that's awesome. And just my last question for you, this is like a more personal question. What's your favorite project? What's the one that you have enjoyed the most so far?
Ooh, that's a hard question because I think most all projects offer different things. I think you'd get projects where you interact with the communities and you get to learn more, and it just introduces you to the world. So for me, projects that are kind of community-centered bring joy to my heart. But I don't think I have a favorite project yet. And I'm not trying to be like a mother who says I don't have a favorite child. It's just true.
Yeah, no, I believe you. So how many projects have you done so far? Well, the organization so far, approximately.
Ooh, that's a hard question. Let me see. I think close to 20.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Is there they all show up in the website?
Yes, they all show up in the website.
Okay. So I will just invite our viewers to go and browse the website, which I have done. It's very complete. And also, if you have questions, you can contact Mutanu, who has been very generous with all this knowledge. And Mutanu, I will just like to thank you. I mean, if you have something, if you want to wrap up or say something or anything that you might wanted to say before and you forgot or something. But if you don't, I just want to thank you. I think this is just amazing work. I think it's like really, I mean, it's really inspiring. I'm thinking on my own context also from the global south, from Latin America. I think these are initiatives that are needed in many parts of the world. And I just wish you the best of luck. And I also wish that from the International Federation for Public History, we can keep building like a collaborative relationship, and that this is not the last time we can do an event like this or have a conversation like this. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, Jimena. I leave this call hopeful for the future and looking forward to interacting with fellow explorers more and the International Federation more.